All right, America, let's talk TikTok. You know, that app where your niece does the renegade and your grandpa somehow became a cooking sensation. It's been making headlines, and not just because of viral dance crazes. The US government has been trying to ban it, claiming it's a national security risk. The American Civil Liberties Union, the folks who usually defend your right to wear a legalized ranch t-shirt, have stepped in to defend TikTok. They argue that banning the app is a blatant attack on free speech, and they're taking the fight to the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court. This isn't just about silly dances and catchy tunes, people. This is about the future of free expression in the digital age. The US government is worried that TikTok's Chinese ownership means the app could be used to spy on Americans. They argue that user data could be handed over to the Chinese government, putting our privacy and national security at risk. The ACLU is arguing that the government is overstepping its bounds. They're basically saying, hey, if you're going to censor something as popular and influential as TikTok, you better have a damn good reason. Okay, let's dive into the government side of the story. They're worried about TikTok because it's owned by ByteDance, a Chinese company. China has this thing called the National Intelligence Law, which basically says that any Chinese company has to cooperate with the government if asked. So, the US government's concern is that the Chinese government could force ByteDance to give them information about TikTok's American users. TikTok collects information about your location, your browsing history, even your keystrokes. Now, imagine if that information fell into the wrong hands. It could be used to track people's movements, identify potential security risks, even target individuals for propaganda or disinformation. The government argues that this isn't just about hypothetical risks. They point to China's track record of cyber espionage and intellectual property theft as evidence that they can't be trusted with our data. They say they're not trying to censor anyone or violate anyone's free speech rights. They just want to protect national security and ensure that American citizens' data is safe. Now, the ACLU isn't buying what the government is selling. They see this potential TikTok ban as a dangerous precedent, a slippery slope towards censorship and the erosion of our digital rights. They argue that the government hasn't presented any concrete evidence that TikTok is actually sharing data with the Chinese government. They're basically calling the government's bluff, saying, put up or shut up. If you have proof that TikTok is a threat, show us. Otherwise, stop trying to control what we can and cannot see online. They argue that banning TikTok is akin to banning a newspaper or shutting down a printing press. Section 4. The Supreme Court's Dilemma, Balancing Security and Free Speech. This whole TikTok saga has landed squarely in the lap of the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court. Their job is to interpret the Constitution and decide whether the government's actions are legal. In this case, they have to weigh two fundamental principles against each other: national security and free speech. On the one hand, the government has a legitimate interest in protecting national security. They have a responsibility to keep the country safe from foreign threats, and that includes cyber threats. The question is, does that responsibility trump our right to free speech? The ACLU argues that the government hasn't met the burden of proof required to justify such a drastic restriction on free speech. They say that banning TikTok sets a dangerous precedent and could have a chilling effect on free expression online. Section 5, Potential Outcomes, what a TikTok ban could mean. So what happens next? Well, the Supreme Court could rule in favor of the government and uphold the TikTok ban. This would be a major blow to free speech advocates and could have a ripple effect across the tech industry. It would signal that the government has broad authority to regulate social media and could embolden them to go after other platforms in the future. On the other hand, the court could side with the ACLU and strike down the ban. This would be a victory for free speech and a sign that the government can't just censor platforms they don't like. It would also set a precedent for future cases involving social media regulation and online censorship. The court could find that the government's concerns about TikTok are valid, but that a complete ban is too extreme. They could order the government to explore less restrictive alternatives, like requiring TikTok to implement stricter data security measures or submit to regular audits. Section 6. The bigger picture, free speech in the digital age. This whole TikTok debacle goes way beyond one social media app. It's about the future of free speech in the digital age. As more and more of our lives move online, it's crucial that we establish clear boundaries for government regulation of the internet. We need to find a balance between protecting national security and preserving our fundamental freedoms. We can't allow the government to censor online platforms just because they don't like what's being said or because they're worried about potential risks. At the same time, we need to be aware of the very real threats posed by foreign governments and bad actors online. The Supreme Court's decision in this case will have far-reaching consequences. It will shape the future of free speech online and determine how much power the government has to regulate the internet.